Mary Fuhrer and I and Peggy Derrick were at the annual meeting of the Pacific Northwest Conference of the United Church of Christ. And Mary has a report to bring back.
Good morning. I want to thank the congregation of CCMI for supporting my attendance at the annual meeting of the Pacific Northwest Conference of the United Church of Christ, PNWUCC. It was a heart-touching, soul-filling, and mind-engaging weekend, and I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it. It was familiar in many ways. There was business to attend to, decisions to be made, and learning to be done. All of that happened. The budget was passed. The official document shows a deficit for the fiscal year, but the only amendment was to increase giving in a line item to its former amount because revenues were above expectations. A staff salary was budgeted for from an income stream that has paid this expense completely from its earnings, with no expenditure of the investment capital. In other words, like all budgets, this one is a living document, and where it goes remains to be seen. Approval was given to make changes in the Constitution of the United Church of Christ. These will result in full recognition and reconciliation with the United Church of Canada and will reorganize structure of the officers for the United Church of Christ. Opportunities for learning abounded, and they all centered around the conference theme of breaking forth. It was an exceptionally focused and well thought out programming effort. You should be proud of the people running this conference. As Conference Minister Mike Denton pointed out, the PNW Conference is the largest geographically of any UCC conference, but it ranks 32nd in size of church membership out of 38 UCC conferences, and it's in one of the most secular parts of the United States. And yet, in the last 20 years, 2/3 of the conference camps have been sold or had their mission significantly reduced. Our conference supports 2 successful camps. Our conference has a successful Communities of Practice program to support clergy and congregations in their health as a community. This work is recognized across the denomination as other conferences ask, how can we do this? The PNW Justice Leadership Program creates internships that send people into wider communities to make a real difference. How does our little Pacific Northwest corner do this? One difference over the past couple years has been a Minister of Vitality position. Courtney Stange triggered that little bit of spitfire many of you met when she first came to visit our church, and who sounds like Billy Graham when she preaches, has listened across the conference in hundreds of conversations. She illustrated her findings with a Venn diagram that showed an intersection of doing justice, acting with loving kindness, and walking humbly with God. That intersection is where vitality comes to life. Around these circles of intersection is a wheel of relationships that makes it all go. And the whole weekend was about building relationships, the foundation from which any meaningful action takes place. So I met Sophie, who was attending her 22nd annual meeting. She's 22 years old. Her mother first brought her as an infant. She attends her grandmother's church in Ritzville because that's what they do in her family. I met Maureen, who was a member in discernment, waiting a call to do adult faith education. I sat at breakfast with Mark Travis, who has been the minister at Suquamish UCC for less than a year. And he told of how hard it is to get big swaths of duct tape off pink shag carpet. And how equally hard it is to get any response from the Native American elders he's reached out to, since the church sits squarely on their land. I listened to a Samoan minister and his wife from Anchorage sing our Friday night meal blessing and thought of all the Pacific Rim relationships that led to that moment. And I listened to our keynote speaker, Bishop Dwayne Royster, a UCC minister from Philadelphia, who is a political activist and community organizer. His blog is called Change the Damn World. He's a huge advocate of relationship, understanding that sometimes this will having difficult conversations to get the desired action. He uses Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well to illustrate his point. First, he gives the woman a name, Maria. He does that with all the unnamed women in the Bible. He notes that this has to be one of the most improbable, most uncomfortable conversations in the whole Bible. It results in Maria leaving her jug at the well so she can hurry to tell the people of her village, people who shun her, what she has heard and seen, and it changes their lives, breaking forth at its finest. Bishop Royster also told of his drive in a rental car from SeaTac to Yakima, a benign drive by any reckoning. You need to understand Bishop Royster is a very big man, both in height and girth. He wears a black clerical suit and a white collar. He knows how to create, use, and speak to power. Yet he was afraid on this drive alone into Eastern Washington because he is also black, and he didn't know anyone to call if something went wrong. I've wondered all week about what kind of relationships need to happen for this reality to break forth into a different story. There were tables of material showing ways to create relationships across the conference that could do some serious breaking forth. There's some examples back on the little table under the graffiti wall. I'll put the conference newsletter on the bulletin board at the bottom of the stairs each time it's published. The lady who publishes it has done it for 30 years. I know we enjoy our congregational independence, and we should, but it's too good to remember we're part of a larger, active, meaningful body as well, working seriously at breaking forth into something still unknown, but definitely amazing. Thank you for the opportunity.
Reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 15. Abide in me as I abide in you. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified in this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you.
You may be asking yourself, why are we reading an excerpt from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous? Thursday last, I was up in the upper room, as we are wont to do in Bible study. Each Thursday we're studying Acts, and in the 22nd chapter of Acts, there's a particular passage where Paul, who's been taken prisoner, is asking if he can speak to the people. And when he speaks to the people, he tells his tale from when he was Saul and then was on the road to Damascus, and about his blinding and arresting experience that took place at that time. And this rang a chord in me because that morning I had heard someone reading from this particular book, and some of the language is almost verbatim from the big book that we're studying up here. And so I happened to mention it in Bible study, and one of the fellows there, who's adept at bringing literature up on his phone, immediately had the appropriate page in Bill's story from the big book, and we read it. And the parallels are kind of uncanny. That was a special moment, and so we're going to share it today. Usually we say, it's on page 10 if you want to follow along, but pay no attention. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people are, for that means a blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists suggested vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. How could there be so much of precise and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe in the spirit of the universe, who knew neither time nor limitation, but that was as far as I dwelled. With ministers and the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength, and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. To Christ, I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. His moral teaching, most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. The wars which had been fought, the burnings and chicanery that religious dispute had facilitated, made me sick. I had honestly doubted whether, on balance, the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I'd seen in Europe and since, the power of God in human affairs was negligible, the brotherhood of man a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed the boss universal, and he certainly had me. But my friend sat before me, and he made the point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he'd ever known. Had this power originated in him? Obviously it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that moment, and this was none at all. That floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He shouted great tidings. I saw that my friend was much more inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped a new soil. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges of my old prejudice. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea. I could go for such conception as creative intelligence, universal mind, or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. I've since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. My friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, "Why don't you choose your own conception of God?" That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. Thus I was convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. At long last I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. A new world came into view.
Well, I made this house out of pillows and cushions and chairs tipped upside down. I tried to make the ceiling high enough so we could move around. Well, that orange peel is a TV set, that peanut shell is a phone, and the leaves in the corner are the things I had and they make it feel like home. Come into my house, it's the house I made. The roof is part of a cardboard box and the wall is a window artwork over there, though it's pictures as you can see. That one on the wall is a bird I met, who popped her song to me. Here is the shell I'm from the ocean shore, where my mom likes to go and explore. It's a special one, so I keep it right here in the bottom of my front door. Come into my house, it's the house I made. The roof is part of a cardboard box, and the wall is a window shade. Come into my house, there's room for you. I'll show you how I made this one, and you can make one too. Well, my father only works part-time, so he helps me to cook the meal. He puts me to bed and tells me stories of kangaroos and seals. My mama drives a pickup truck for a bakery downtown. The truck in the corner is not quite like hers, but it's closest one I've found. Come into my house, it's a house I made. The roof is part of the cardboard box, and the wall is a window shade. Come into my house, there's room for you. I'll show you how I made this one, and you can make one too. Well, houses are so much fun to make, I do it all the time. You can use anything you got, whatever you can find. Benches, towels, bedspreads, blankets, old sheets and pillows too. Just make sure there's room enough for a friend to visit you. Come into my house, it's a house I made. The roof is part of a cardboard box, and the wall is a window shade. Come into my house, there's room for you. I'll show you how I built this one, and you can make one too. Come into my house, it's the house I made. The roof is part of a cardboard box, and the wall is a window shade. Come into my house, there's room for you. Well, I'll show you how I made this one, and you can make one too.
Thank you, everybody. Over these last 4 Sundays since Easter time, we've been talking about home, a place called home, what it means to feel at home, and what it might mean for us in the church to feel at home. So all of this has been leading to that one burning question. Is there such a thing as a home for not only for our bodies, but for our souls? And I don't just mean a home that we pick out from amongst the many options available. I'm asking whether there is one real home, the one that when we find it, we'll recognize it with laughing tears of joy, because consciously or unconsciously we've been searching for it all our lives. For the writer of John's Gospel, Jesus Christ is that home. He's so politically incorrect when he talks about it that there are parts of the Gospel that are hard for us to read, passages we have to cross our fingers for. I am the way, the truth, and the life, as Jesus says. No one comes to the Father except through me. You're not really supposed to say that sort of thing. And his Jesus is at loggerheads with the Jews who won't accept who he says he is. We wince at the anti-Semitic language that's simply intolerable in our more enlightened times. But for John, it was simply intolerable that Jesus came to his own and his own did not receive him. This is the true light that is coming to the world. And the passage we read today is one of the climaxes of the story, that invitation. Abide in me as I abide in you. Make your home in me as I make my home in you. John's claim to us is, look no further. This is it. These days, it just isn't in good taste to declare your religion as the one answer, the one true reality. So Christianity, especially in the United Church of Christ, defers to the spirit of the age. As a faith tradition, we put ourselves out there in the great spiritual marketplace alongside all the other options, all the other great world religions and all the latest alternatives promising peace and wholeness. We strive to make ourselves as attractive as possible, and then we just sit anxiously, hoping that people will choose us. And lots of us here, maybe most of us, came this morning because we shopped around at one time or another, and this is what we liked. I have nothing against shopping. In fact, I love shopping, although I'm very stingy about spending my money. One of the joys about moving back to this country was that it didn't make sense to bring our furniture with us, and none of our electrical appliances would work. They wouldn't even plug in the wall, let alone work on the juice that would come out. So we took our life savings, we planted them in a brand new bank account here in this country, and then with our shiny new credit cards in our pockets, we went shopping. Hit the stores, and it was really fun. Picked out all new furniture that we liked. There was a kind of personal reinvention to it. We were furnishing our very own house, the first one we had ever owned, and each decision could be taken really carefully. It wasn't just the furniture and the food processor either. Every time you move to a new place, you can be a new person. You're amongst people who don't know you. So change your name if you want to. You could do that. Nobody will know. Change your style. Drop all your old commitments. Change your email address. None of that junk mail comes for a while. Leave behind whatever layers of grubbiness you accumulated and just be new, which is fun too. It's fun to move 6,000 miles away so that here all you good people only know the version of me that I have chosen to tell you. Not, of course, that there are any secrets. I would love to introduce you to all my old friends and colleagues. I think you'd get along fine. But that isn't going to happen, and partly that's liberating. We all have the freedom to invent ourselves, and it's a freedom we treasure, which makes it interesting that today after church, the parents will be meeting to talk about the faith that they want to hand on to their kids. Many of us are here today because somebody who loved us committed themselves to passing on their faith to us. What was most precious to them, they wanted us to have it too. They offered it, we accepted it, maybe with some bumps along the way. As a church, we certainly want to support that endeavor in every way we can. But there's nothing automatic about it. Adolescence hits, kids snuff out our attempts to indoctrinate them, and they make it their business to rebel. That's their job. They end up in all kinds of places. We wouldn't want it any other way. It's only by all of us trying on different identities that we figure out who we are. So maybe popular culture will claim them, a peer group that becomes their compass for every decision they have to make, or a role model who captures their imagination, or college, that supreme place for self-reinvention. We have no guarantee that the gifts we want to pass on will stick. We can only trust that what's important to us is rooted in there someplace, and that if it's right for them, they'll come back. But we don't know. And pressuring them is surely the best way to drive them in the opposite direction. So fast forward 10 years, 20, 40, 60, and here we are, the product of all the choices we've made. It's kind of neat, but I want to know, is that all there is? The little houses that we build for ourselves out of the materials that we can find, out of all our preferences and our experiences, is that who we are? When Dave read that story to us, an AA story on Thursday night, another possibility leapt out at us, demanding to be considered. There is a spiritual place that is home. There is a higher power waiting to be let in, a power that can save your life. This is the place, Bill would have us believe, the one you've always been homesick for, The one where, when you find it, you realize why you've been disappointed with every other spiritual place you've ever tried. Because it's not just one more, it's the one. What John's Gospel says audaciously is that you and I are invited into the intimacy that Jesus enjoyed with God. And it's not an intimacy to tie us down, it's an intimacy to set us free. It's our souls getting to unpack and settle down in a true home so that we can go out into the world and come back all from a centered place of healing and acceptance and peace and joy. Like the man in the AA story, his roots grasped new soil. We loved that phrase. New life began to flow. I want you to understand what I'm talking about is not a bunch of doctrine. It's not a list of doctrinal statements or precepts. Actually, it isn't about information at all. It's about relationship. It's about God treasuring us and the Spirit wanting to dance in us. It's about the energy that is love. People saw it in Jesus, but it doesn't stop there. I wonder if we didn't see it going on around us last night. Sure, lots of us paid good money for that meal, for that show, but that isn't what was happening. Our musicians were pouring their hearts out in our direction, out of love, love for the music itself, but love for us too, and love for our life together, love for the good thing it was to be together. And the Spirit was working overtime, wrapping us in warmth and laughter, binding us all together, lifting us out of whatever heaviness we brought with us, offering us joy. When Eric and I met last Tuesday, it was he who suggested that we sing "They'll Know We Are Christians by Our Love" in our service this morning. Okay, I thought, it doesn't fit, but I don't have anything better to suggest. We have this kind of thing where we just give each other a turn. In fact, is I get really bossy, right? Anyway, I don't like being bossy. It turns out Eric was right and I was wrong. Because that's exactly where this theme and this weekend have brought us. John's Gospel, by way of AA, by way of Come Into My House, by way of all that incredible music last night. We are one in the Spirit, because the Spirit, when it gets moving, is so irresistible. They'll know we are Christians if they let the scales of pride and prejudice fall from their eyes, long enough to observe what's going on. They'll know we are Christians because of love. It's God. It's what it feels like to be home. And I'm glad that we asked the choir to come back on the morning after the night before, even though I'm sure every one of them wished they could have stayed in bed. If I'm even half right, then what we do this morning finishes what they did last night. We gathered around all those tables. Now we gather around this one. We enjoyed all those songs. Now we sing these songs. And everything that was most wonderful about last night points here to the love that God has given us in one another and in being alive and creative and generous. This is where we name those things. This is where we celebrate them. And consciously, deliberately, joyfully, we choose to make our home in them. And we choose to pass them on to our children because there's nothing better in the whole world, though I know I'm biased. To quote the Jesus of John's Gospel, I have said these things to you that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. To which, what can you say, except your most grateful, heartfelt, joyful thanks? Amen.
Hear
me.